Okay, so you know that feeling you get, right? When a certain sound just hits you and you instantly know what it is. Like, it's so familiar, so powerful,
Yeah,
it just takes over.
totally.
Well, for millions of people worldwide, that sound is Motown.
It is.
So today, we're going to dive deep dive into the incredible story behind that sound and the legendary label, Motown Records, that brought it to life.
We'll be taking a close look at a retrospective from Soul Chop Records about the enduring legacy of Motown.
Right, and along the way.
Really trying to grasp
Yeah.
Berry Gordy Jr.'s vision. I mean, it wasn't just about music, right? It was about creating a cultural phenomenon, one that still resonates, to this day.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there who, want to understand the heart of a story but don't have all day to get there,
Right.
we've done the work for you. We've extracted the most fascinating parts, the core of how Motown came to be and why it still matters so much today.
Exactly.
So rewind the clock. January 12, 1959, Detroit, Michigan. Enter Berry Gordy Jr.
Now, what's interesting about Gordy is his background. Before Motown, he was working on the Ford assembly line.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it. Ford was all about standardized parts, efficient processes, right?
Right.
Well, Gordy took that same approach and applied it to music.
Wow.
He envisioned this consistent team, songwriters, producers, musicians, all working together to create a really recognizable, high-quality product, something with wide appeal.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, exactly. And his vision included developing artists holistically, not just their sound, but their image.
So he looked at making records like building cars.
You could say that.
That's amazing.
He was all about breaking down those racial barriers that existed in the music market at that time.
Wow.
So he started with Tamla Records, and his first breakthrough was Come to Me by Marv Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Great song.
And then, 1960,
The big year.
it became official, Motown Record Corporation.
The name, of course, a nod to Detroit's nickname, Motortown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was right around then that they began to craft what we now know as the Motown Sound.
Which is so distinct, so iconic.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how they managed to blend all these different musical elements so seamlessly.
It's true. It's got its own flavor, but so many influences.
You've got the raw emotion, the call and response of gospel,
Yeah.
the deep feeling of the blues, often coming through in the lead singer's phrasing,
Right.
more sophisticated harmonies, instrumental arrangements drawn from jazz, all built on top of this incredibly infectious pop beat that just makes you want to move.
I mean, can you listen to Motown and not want to dance?
Impossible.
You can hear all those threads, all those influences in the music, and it's instantly identifiable.
Yeah.
Like that prominent bass line, often melodic, right?
Yeah.
Those hand claps, cutting through the mix, the rich orchestration, and that signature driving backbeat.
A recipe for success.
It really is. And soon, the stars began to align.
Well, more like a whole galaxy of stars.
Yes.
We're talking the Miracles with Smokey Robinson,
The genius.
Mary Wells with her unique voice,
Oh, yeah.
and then the Marvelettes. What's significant about them is they gave Motown its first #1 hit in 1961 with Please, Mr. Postman,
Huge moment for the label.
a real landmark. It proved that Motown could hit it big on the mainstream charts.
And it was just the beginning.
It was. Then came Martha and the Vandellas.
Oh, love them.
And by the mid-60s, it was an explosion of talent.
Like the universe was saying, here's some magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Supremes, the Temptations, the Four Tops, and of course, a young Stevie Wonder.
A legend in the making.
Just think about the sheer volume of hits from that era. I mean, My Girl, Stop, In the Name of Love, I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Timeless classics.
They really are. So we've got to talk about Gordy's management style.
Right. This is where it gets interesting.
I mean, that assembly line approach, it wasn't just about recording, was it?
No, it was about shaping the artists themselves.
Shaping the artists themselves.
He implemented this incredibly structured artist development program.
So raw talent wasn't enough.
Raw talent was just the starting point.
Interesting.
Artists went through etiquette training, learned diction, public speaking, even choreography.
Wow, like a finishing school for pop stars?
Yeah, you could say that.
What do you think had the biggest impact from all of that on their long-term success and being able to appeal to such a wide audience?
Well, I think that initial focus on polish and presentation really set the stage for Motown's broader appeal.
Yeah.
It allowed their artists to kind of seamlessly transition into mainstream culture later on
Interesting.
because they were already so well-rounded.
I see.
They weren't just great singers, they were performers. They were ready for prime time.
But behind all those incredible voices, there was a whole other force at work.
Oh, yeah.
The Funk Brothers, right?
The unsung heroes.
Truly.
They defined that Motown sound.
They were the band, weren't they?
They were the studio musicians, often
Yes.
uncredited on those early recordings.
Yeah.
But they were the rhythmic and harmonic foundation for almost every single Motown hit.
Amazing.
You think about James Jimerson on bass. His bass lines, man.
Mm.
Melodic, counter-rhythmic. They were so much more than just, a basic root note.
Yeah.
They were like lead instruments.
Right.
Benjamin on drums, his feel, that pocket, it just made you want to move.
Yeah.
And then you have Earl Van Dyke on keyboards, providing all those classic harmonic textures. They were the engine room,
They were.
and they rarely got the recognition they deserved.
It's incredible to think how many legendary tracks they played on.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the songwriters, the producers,
Can't forget them.
most notably Holland Dozier Holland.
Those names are synonymous with Motown.
They wrote so many of the songs we still know and love today.
What was it about them, do you think, that made them so successful?
Well, they had this incredible knack for writing instantly memorable melodies,
Oh, yeah.
catchy tunes. But then they would layer those melodies with these sophisticated harmonies, instrumental arrangements. So the songs were both catchy and musically rich.
That's the key, isn't it?
It's that balance that's so hard to achieve.
Exactly.
Their songwriting, their production techniques, they define the Motown sound of the 60s.
Absolutely. And by that point, late 60s, Motown was more than just a record label.
Oh, yeah.
It was a cultural force.
The movement.
It had become the largest independent Black-owned record label in America.
And their music was consistently topping the pop charts.
That crossover success, it was huge.
It was a real testament to the power of music to bridge racial divides.
And then came another wave of talent, like Marvin Gaye and the Jackson 5.
Talk about icons.
Marvin Gaye's journey is so incredible. His album, What's Going On, in 1971, it felt like a departure for Motown.
It did.
It wasn't just love songs anymore. He was addressing really significant social issues, war, the environment.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it raises this question about the changing role of music and where Motown fit in.
Right.
What's going on represented a much more mature, a more socially conscious direction.
Yeah.
It showed that Motown was willing to evolve with the times.
Yeah.
And that their artists had this incredible depth.
And then you have Jackson 5, totally different vibe.
Oh, yeah.
They burst onto the scene in 69 with I Want You Back.
Injecting this youthful energy.
Yeah.
Bringing in a whole new generation of fans.
Exactly. But as the 70s progressed, things started to shift at Motown.
Yeah.
There were challenges.
The departure of Holland Dozier Holland was big.
What happened there?
Disputes over royalties, creative control, the usual stuff.
I guess it's bound to happen when you have that much talent, that much success.
But it wasn't just them.
Oh.
More and more artists were starting to seek creative freedom over their work.
They wanted more control.
Exactly. Artists like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, they negotiated for and ultimately achieved a lot more autonomy. And the albums that followed, like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life, Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On, they're proof of the power of that creative freedom.
They're masterpieces.
They are.
And then in 1972, there was a really big decision, the move from Detroit to Los Angeles.
That was huge, yeah.
That must changed everything.
It was a controversial move, driven by Gordy's ambition to move into film and television.
So Lady Sings the Blues with Diana Ross, that was part of that.
Exactly. But, it's interesting to think about what that relocation did to the sound of Motown.
Because it's such a specific sound.
A lot of the original session musicians, the songwriters, the people who really created that Motown sound in Detroit, they didn't go.
They stayed in Detroit.
They did. So the musical landscape shifted.
The sound evolved.
It did.
Yeah.
The LA scene was different.
Right.
And without the Funk Brothers, that core group of songwriters, well, the sound inevitably changed.
But they still had success, right?
Yeah.
In the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah. You think about Rick James, that raw funk sound.
Yeah.
Super freak. What a track.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, Lionel Richie, the Commodores.
So many hits.
Huge.
So the classic sound might have evolved, but they were still a force.
Absolutely. But as the 80s went on, the music industry was changing again.
How so?
Hip-hop, electronic music, these were becoming the dominant sounds.
Right.
And Motown, they struggled to adapt.
But I guess that happens to even the biggest names, right?
It does.
Yeah.
And the departure of Michael Jackson, that was a huge blow.
Yeah.
He was such an iconic figure.
And then, in 1988, Berry Gordy decided to sell Motown?
MCA and Boston Ventures, yeah.
The end of an era?
It was. The end of Motown as an independent, black-owned label.
What happened after that?
Well, Motown changed hands a few times throughout the 90s.
Right.
There were moments of renewed energy, like with Boys II Men, Erykah Badu.
Yeah.
Both bring their own styles, but still honoring that Motown heritage.
Very different artists.
Yeah.
But both rooted in soul.
Absolutely.
And then ultimately in 1999, Motown became part of Universal Music Group.
Which meant it was now part of this much bigger corporate structure.
Right, so it's not independent anymore.
But that catalog, that incredible collection of Motown classics, it's still incredibly valuable.
Oh, for sure.
And in recent years, they've been working to nurture the Motown legacy, signing new R&B and hip-hop artists.
Keeping the sound alive.
Exactly. And it's amazing to see that so many of those original artists, the Temptations, the Four Tops, Diana Ross, they're all still performing.
Still going strong.
It's a testament to the power of their music.
It really is. So if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture,
Yeah.
Motown was more than just a record label.
It was a cultural movement.
Absolutely.
It gave Black artists a platform to achieve mainstream success.
At a time when it was really, really difficult.
During segregation, yeah.
That impact, it can't be overstated.
It changed the landscape of American music.
And you can still hear its influence today, right?
Everywhere. Hip-hop artists sampling those classic grooves, Beyoncé, Bruno Mars, they all pay tribute to the Motown sound.
It's time.
It's eternal.
And as that Soul Chop Records piece pointed out, Motown's legacy continues to inspire new artists, new labels.
Especially those dedicated to artist development, to creating soulful music with meaning.
Like Soul Chop Records.
Exactly.
You know, Berry Gordy once said, Motown was about music for all people. White and black, blue and green, cops and robbers. I was reluctant to have our music alienate anyone.
Powerful words.
They really get to the heart of what made Motown so special.
And so universal.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. The power of music to break down barriers, to connect people from all walks of life.
I love that.
Motown did that in a way that few others have.
They did.
So I'll leave you with this question. Which Motown song or artist means the most to you?
What is it about their music that still moves you?
Because that legacy, it's still alive. It's still evolving.
It is.
It's Motown.
And that's the magic.
That's the magic.
Subscribe to my channel.